Justin Fields, Luke Getsy, and the Chicago Bears offense have been under a ton of scrutiny through the first 2 weeks of the season, and for good reason. But I think all of that attention on that side of the ball is helping us overlook a little bit some very real problems with Matt Eberflus and the defense.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook, join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. On the show today, we take a closer look at Matt Eberflus's defense. What's gone wrong through the first 2 weeks of the season that we certainly expect to continue to go wrong against Patrick Mahomes on Sunday. But then more specifically, like how much of this is coaching staff, play calling, and player development side of things from the coaches, and how much of this is personnel issues that maybe fall a little bit more on Ryan Poles in terms of free agent signings and how they've been doing, draft picks, how they've been doing, personnel decisions on the whole in terms of where they have and have not invested on this roster. And we'll wrap up looking for signs of hope for improvement. Why there's good signs for this defense to still be able to improve and play better over the course of the season. And it's not going to be miserable for all 18 weeks. But I think we should make sure that we check in on where this defense stands right now. Because, of course, all the attention's been on Fields and Getsy because that's been the most important thing this season. Getting the quarterback right, getting the offense right. Everything's about Fields and around Fields. But one of those things around Fields that can have an impact on how well he plays is how well the defense is playing. Are the Bears playing from behind on the scoreboard and having to abandon the run and pass heavily to try and catch up on the scoreboard, or versus, Fields playing with a lead or playing with a very low deficit or playing tied with not a lot of points on the board for the other team, puts the quarterback and the play caller in slightly different situations. To be clear, the defense does not excuse or bail out or explain the Bears' offensive struggles, but we can admit when a defense plays well, it makes the offense's job that much easier. And when a defense plays poorly, it can make the offense's job more difficult. And it certainly hasn't been anything close to stellar defense from the Chicago Bears through the first 2 weeks. To their credit, I think the defense was better in week 2 than it was in week 1 against Jordan Love versus Baker Mayfield. I think, you look from a scoring perspective, the pick 6 against Tampa kind of inflated that final score a little bit to where it was 27-17, but the defense only gave up 20, which is a very good progress there compared to the 38 they gave up against the Green Bay Packers the week before. But there's still some very real issues here. They made it way too easy for Baker Mayfield after having made it way too easy for Jordan Love. Two quarterbacks that have, Love still has a lot to prove, and I can't say that I'm a huge believer just yet, even though he has a bunch of touchdowns, but I think they're scheming up a lot for him, but his completion percentage is still low. Regardless, Love is not a guy who's a proven threat at quarterback consistently. Baker Mayfield's a guy who's done it before, but has had some down years since then, and I'm still not sold that he's taking this big resurgence step forward this year. He's played 2 pretty bad defenses to start this season, but it's not like they got torched by Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, and you'd be like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, and most defenses struggle to stop those quarterbacks. These are 2 offenses that I think had some very significant weaknesses that the Bears were not able to do anything against and were particularly vulnerable against. Certainly when we talk about things like, the hits principle and things that will be emphases is the plural of emphases, right, of Matt Eberflus's defense. The T in hits, turnovers, takeaways, 0 so far for this Bears defense. And, some of the hustle and intensity stuff, we'll get to that in a little bit when we talk about coaching versus personnel here. But, as far as performance goes, the Bears defense through 2 weeks of the season lead the NFL in missed tackles. They have missed 26 tackles in 2 games. Slightly inflated against the Buccaneers. They missed 18 against the Bucs. And then all you math majors at home can figure out that means they missed 8 against the Green Bay Packers. 8, not the end of the world, not great. There are at least one team that has missed fewer than 8 this season. I saw one team had 7. I don't remember which team it was as I was scrolling through them. So 8 is still a lot for one game, but 18 against the Buccaneers is horrendous. I think 11 of those were against the run. 5 were after the catch, and then the 2 of them were Yannick Ngakwe's missed sacks on Baker Mayfield. But they're playing sloppy defense. Coverage-wise, it was too easy for Jordan Love to continually attack the middle of the field. Baker Mayfield torched them on third downs in particular. The Bears have given up so many conversions on third and longs. Even the situations that are supposed to be easy for your defense, the Bears have had seemingly the most trouble with those. And dating back to last season, I think it's 12 straight game that the Bears have given up 25 or more points. I read somewhere, I wasn't able to confirm this, that if they do it again against the Chiefs, that'll be an NFL record for most consecutive games giving up 25 points by a defense. And this is a defense that has a defensive head coach. You hired a defensive coordinator to run your team. If anything, it makes more sense that we're not sure what's going on offensively, but the defense should be kind of the thing that the buck stops with the head coach. And as much as he tries to head coach and be involved in both sides of the ball, Matt Eberflus's specialty, Matt Eberflus's emphasis, trying to get those E's in there, Matt Eberflus's emphasis is on defense. And the defense has not stepped up to the plate, despite big investments there in free agency, quite a bit of draft capital investment in there. And so it starts to beg this question of okay, well, wait a minute. Is this Matt Eberflus and the coaching staff not being able to do enough or coach well enough a group of defensive players that have talent? Or are they out there with not enough talent at not the key positions, and then therefore that falling on the general manager for not having supplied this defensive coaching staff with the players that they can be successful with? We're going to try and dive into that question a little bit because, of course, it's never black and white. It's never all one or the other, but I feel like it falls a bit more on the coaching staff than it does the personnel at this point. And we'll go into that discussion next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. And eBay Motors has teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football and their host, Vinny Iyer, to bring you some of the best fantasy football picks each week, all season long. Whether you're preparing for daily fantasy or you're scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. How about one from the Bears-Chiefs game, but unfortunately not from the Bears because the Bears present a pretty favorable matchup for second-year running back Isaiah Pacheco. He hasn't delivered a ton to his fantasy football managers so far this season, but this might be the time to roll him out of the garage with plenty of production on the ground, cleaning up against a bad Bears defense in Week 3. We're talking about it on the podcast today, and Vinny is all over it on Locked On Fantasy Football. It's a real opportunity here for the Chiefs to get a lead and for Pacheco to break some chunk runs with an excellent shot to score and provide some punctuation in what's gearing up to be a home blowout. And if the Chiefs had the lead, they're going to run the ball, and they're going to give that ball to Isaiah Pacheco. That's from Vinny Iyer at Locked On Fantasy Football, trying to help you win your fantasy football championship. And eBay Motors knows that a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same thing is true for your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. We're talking brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, available only to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Matt Eberflus can only do so much as the coach, right? The players do have to go on the field and execute and do what they are coached to do. And Eberflus can't, make the tackles for them. He can't catch the interception that lands in Jaquan Brisker's breadbasket. But at the same time, when a group of 11 starters plus other guys rotating in all collectively struggle in some of the same areas or seem to not be able to work as one cohesive unit, you start to look at the coaching staff and the organization, what they're being taught, as opposed to like the individual talent of the individual players. So like when you think about this Bears defense, I don't know how much Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams can do from a pass rushing standpoint. When, yes, you've got Unique Ngakoue, but like we knew entering this season, the personnel would not be good enough to generate a consistent enough pass rush. This defense would be, to some degree, held back by its lack of pass rush. Now, a little disappointed in Ngakoue against the Buccaneers, missing 2 tackles. He actually missed 4 tackles in the game, but 2 on Baker Mayfield, missing 2 potential sacks. Like, at least he's getting home. He's just not finishing. So, like, there's progress there. But the rest of the pass rush has been lackluster. But we knew it would be. And that's a personnel thing that Ryan Poles has not exactly admitted, but basically admitted, like, work in progress, and the pass rush is going to be a problem there. So, like, that part, I don't necessarily fault Eberflus for. And then if you have a limited pass rush, that makes coverage a lot more difficult, and you can start to write you might call them explanations, other people might call them excuses for what is holding this Chicago Bears defense back. You can also look and say, well, listen, no pass rush, plus your secondary is almost entirely rookies and second-year players. And now you add injuries in against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're really hurting on the back end. It's Jalen Johnson plus rookie cornerback Tyreek Stevenson, third-string slot cornerback Greg Stroman, because Kyler Gordon and Josh Blackwell were hurt. And then in this game, at one point, both Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker were injured. So you had second-year, 7th-round pick Elijah Hicks at one safety spot and undrafted rookie free agent safety Quindell Johnson at the other safety spot, and he just got here 2 weeks ago. Like, at some point, you look at this defense against the Buccaneers, and at some point, you have to kind of tip your cap, or not tip your cap, but kind of, throw your hands in the air, wave the white flag, and say, listen, what is Eberflus supposed to do with one good pass rusher, one starting, healthy, experienced defensive back, and a bunch of rookies, right? A bunch of rookies and unproductive guys. Like, I'm willing to go there for some of that. But I'm also willing to look at this defense and feel like, boy, there's a lot more that this coaching staff could do. You see the sloppiness out there in ways that you feel like can point more to coaching, right? When guys like Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, who have been very successful on other much better defenses, come here and play worse than what they were doing on other teams. Sure, some of that's a reflection of the players around them, but like some of it is just guys not being coached well or not being put in positions to be successful. Like there was a play against the Buccaneers, you may remember, where they threw a wide receiver screen pass on 3rd and 5 on the right side of the field, where the Buccaneers had 4 receivers to that side, empty backfield for Mayfield, single receiver to the left. And the Bears had 2 cornerbacks over those 4 receivers. They still had 2 deep safeties, 2 linebackers in the box, the cornerback on their side. So there were 2 defenders lined up against 4 receivers on the same side of the field. And so, of course, when they throw a screen pass to that side, you then have 3 blockers for 2 defenders plus the ball carrier. So, of course, like the offense is going to succeed there. And that's players and coaches not adjusting. That's not, the players should be coached and know, or the coaches should communicate in like, hey, adjust the defense. That when you see 4 guys to that side, we need to get more bodies over there. Instead, the Bears had 6 guys in the box in an empty backfield and weren't even blitzing on the play, and they gave up an easy screen. That's just like, should be simple coaching adjustments, play calling, that this defense, we should be able to expect to check into a situation like that. I also think coverage-wise, it's pretty bland, pretty boring, pretty predictable. I went through some of the coverage charting data on this Bears defense this season. And right now, the vast majority of the time, they're sitting in cover 3 or cover 2. Right now, through the first 2 weeks of the season, 31% of their coverages have been cover 3, 29% have been cover 2, and then their third most frequent coverage is cover 1 at 15%. So about a third of the time, they're sitting back in cover 3 no matter what. At 60% of the time, it's either cover 3 or cover 2, like pretty basic coverages. Single deep safety in zone or 2 deep safeties in zone. And certainly there are variations that you could do on top of that, but the Bears don't. They don't really mix it up all that much. And particularly, I'm disappointed with the two deep safety looks when they're sitting back in cover two. I looked against the Buccaneers in particular. The Bears had two deep safeties. I believe there were 20 plays in coverage where when they were dropping back, both the safeties went deep. 14 of those were basic cover two defense. So I don't know. I actually didn't calculate the exact math, and that 14 times 5 would be 50 and 20 is 70% of the time when they had two deep safeties, it was a regular cover two defense. Somebody like Baker Mayfield can pick up on that and go two deep safeties and pretty quickly realize it's cover two. It's not cover 4. It's not cover 6. It's cover 2 the majority of that time, and then you can start to pick it apart that much easier when they're sitting back in single deep safety. And you can kind of know, okay, it's going to be cover 3 the majority of the time that way. The Bears didn't run much man coverage at all during that game. So then when they were in a single deep safety spot, you were looking at cover 3. It's their most common coverage. I think against Baker Mayfield, they only ran man coverage on 10 to 15% of their plays in that game. And so single deep safety equals zone coverage equals cover 3 all the time. And so it becomes easier for defenses to pick up on that stuff. Now, sure, it's harder to disguise your coverages and do crazy coverages when you have rookies and second-year players in the secondary. So I'm willing to give Eberflus some sort of I don't want to say a pass because the defense needs to be better, but an explanation, an excuse, something, but it just hasn't been good enough. To his credit, they came out and blitzed more against Baker Mayfield. They've stunted a decent amount on the defensive line. They've come up with some different creative ways to blitz. I think sometimes the timing of the blitzes and sometimes it can be predictable. There was one play in the game, you could hear it in the broadcast, where Baker Mayfield goes up to the line of scrimmage and goes, watch the slot, slot, and goes back, change the protection. Of course, slot cornerback blitzes. You could tell by the formation. You could tell by the giveaway. But at the same time, it's your third string slot cornerback. You don't expect him to be able to disguise the blitz very well. So can you kill Eberflus for that? Not exactly. But the defense does need to be better. The missed tackles are really the one where it's you're coaching, hustle and intensity and playing through the whistle and missing, 18 tackles, was it? Yeah, against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where it's everyone. Every single Bears starter except for Jaquan Brisker has missed a tackle this season. Your missed tackle leaders, Yannick Ngakoue, TJ Edwards, Jack Sanborn, and DeMarcus Walker, 4-3-3-3, make up the majority of your missed tackles, but almost everyone has missed a tackle this season. That's team-wide. That's not just one bad player having a tough time tackling. Everybody's missing tackles, and that's a real problem that, again, feels like, are they coaching it well enough? Are they getting on these guys to tackle better? And from a hustle and effort and intensity standpoint, there was a play down the left sideline in that game against the Buccaneers where Mike Evans catches it, Elijah Hicks lowers the shoulder, misses the tackle, and then Evans runs down the sideline for a few extra yards, where you watch that play, you could see it on the broadcast, Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, and Jack Sanborn, I think, were the three players. They were running behind Mike Evans. Elijah Hicks comes up to try and make the tackle. All three of those guys stop running. They walk because they assume, Hicks will make the tackle. I don't have to keep hustling here. I don't need to get in on the tackle. No. Why would I want to get in on a tackle if the whistle hasn't been blown yet? Why would I want to be physical in this defense? No, we'll just jog it out. Of course, then they miss the tackle. So then they all have to sprint and try and catch up to Mike Evans, where he gets an extra 10, 15 yards because those guys didn't hustle, didn't play through the whistle. And that's the whole principle that this head coach was brought here on. That's his whole philosophy. And we're not seeing some of the key veteran leaders of this defense execute it. That's where the frustration is with Matt Eberflus. And that's where personnel excuses can only go so far. When the guys that you do have that you thought you could rely on aren't playing up to the standard that they need to. And that, to me, points to not being coached well or hard enough at this point. So it's a real problem. The problem is multifaceted. But this defense can still get better, should still get better, dare I say, will still get better. We'll look for some of the signs of hope and some of the reasons why this defense will improve as this season goes on. Next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks, the better way to do daily fantasy sports, because PrizePicks puts you in complete control over whether you can win or lose. Unlike other daily fantasy sports platforms where, you're putting your lineup against 1,000, 10,000 other people and you hope you're the one out of 10,000 lottery chance of winning with your fantasy lineup and getting some actual rewards there. With PrizePicks, it's you versus the PrizePicks projections, you versus the house. So you're in complete control. You pick 2 to 6 players and whether they'll perform above or below their PrizePicks projection. So this week in Bears Chiefs, Justin Fields' PrizePick projection is 187.5 passing yards. Can you pick him as one of your players and whether he'll go above or below 187 passing yards? You pair that with Patrick Mahomes, who's at 299.5, and you go 2 to 6 players over, above, or below their passing numbers or the rushing numbers or whatever, and you can win up to 25 times your money. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. prizepicks.com, promo code LockedOnNFL. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. This Bears defense is struggling right now. They've been struggling going back 12 games in a row, giving up 25 points a game. They're going to give up a bunch of points to the Chiefs this weekend. This is not going to be the week where the defense figures it out and locks in and shuts down the opposing offense and ends that 25-point streak. Almost certainly will not be. But that doesn't mean it won't get better. It doesn't mean this defense is a lost cause and won't be able to stop anybody all season long. I think there's a few things we can point to here to say this is why the Bears defense is going to get better. First of all, I think they're going to get healthier at some point here, right? You're not going to be missing both safeties for multiple quarters at a time every week. We don't know the prognosis for Eddie Jackson at this point with the foot injury, but there's some concern there because he had a foot injury last season. But as we're recording this on Tuesday night, we haven't really gotten a concrete update on him. I would expect he might miss a couple games at least, but we don't know how long-term that's going to be. So eventually, in theory, he should be back. Kyler Gordon is on injured reserve with the broken hand, but is supposed to be short-term injured reserve. He should be back at some point during this season. Josh Blackwell will likely be back even sooner than either of those two guys. So you can start to get a lot closer to fully healthy back in your secondary. And along with that, when you have a rookie Tyreek Stevenson, a second-year Jaquan Brisker, and a second-year Kyler Gordon, and a second-year perhaps Josh Blackwell in there as well, these are guys who need experience. They're going to have growing pains. Tyreek Stevenson is going to get beat sometimes. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to get shoved to the ground by Mike Evans with no flag thrown sometimes. That's going to happen. But, they learn from that, and they adjust, and they get better, and they continue to grow. And sometimes it's about the mistakes that lead you to improve as a player. We saw Kyler Gordon struggle a lot as a rookie. And prior to his injury in week 1, looked great. Looked great in the preseason. Looked great in those first couple quarters of week 1. I'm excited to see what Kyler Gordon does when he comes back. That's going to be a big upgrade. We've seen Tyreek Stevenson have playmaking ability. He hasn't been completely toasted. I mean, he's given up a couple, he gave a bad touchdown against the Buccaneers, but it's not like he's been totally lost. He's there. He's just a step late, right? You know what I mean? It's like he's getting there. You're seeing it slow down for him. You're seeing him improve, but it's just not all the way there yet. But it will be. It's gonna get there for him. And you look across this Bears defense, right? It's DeMarcus Walker's first 2 games as a Chicago Bear. It's Yannick Ngakwe's first 2 games as a Chicago Bear. Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, first 2 games as Chicago Bears. There's a lot of turnover in this defensive starting lineup, and it takes time for those guys to really get comfortable in this scheme, to mesh, to really feel out their teammates and know, okay, if I'm in this zone and I know how far away Eddie Jackson is, I know how far away TJ Edwards is, and I know how far away, Kyler Gordon is, and what space I have to be in, how much space I can allow between me and them to still be able to get to the ball. It's that muscle memory sort of feeling of okay, I can count on him to cover this much ground, so I need that tells me how much ground I need to cover then, right? And it just takes time of going through the reps of doing that in live game situations, communicating through different situations on the defense. It's going to take time for these guys to really settle in, especially on the back 7 there. And we've seen Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards be high-quality players. We've seen Eddie Jackson be a high-quality player. We've seen Jalen Johnson, who I still think is playing high quality. It's not like you look at this defense and go, man, they just don't have talent. How are they going to squeeze talent out of these guys? I mean, that was the case last year. But now you have guys that have talent, and they're going to show up at some point. It might not be all at the same time. It might not ever be a dominating defensive performance, but we're going to get there, right? They've been this close to a couple of turnovers. Jalen Johnson forced a fumble that was recovered by the offense. Jaquan Brisker dropped an interception. These turnovers will start at some point. Unique Ngakoue has missed a couple of sacks. We've seen, I think DeMarcus Walker may have missed a sack too. Like eventually, you're not just going to keep missing sacks. That's a sign that they're getting to the quarterback. They're going to start making those tackles. These are professional, veteran pass rushers who have made mistakes and need to be coached better. But also you would expect that they'll learn from those too. And those sacks, those missed sacks that are pressures that end up extending the play will turn into sacks and will turn into bigger plays for this Bears defense. And I think some of this you can start to explain away a little bit with just how injured they were in the preseason and how little they played in the preseason. We didn't really see Tremaine Edmonds that much. We didn't see TJ Edwards that much. We didn't see this starting 11 defense, I don't think ever, all 11 guys in the preseason. And to be fair, we only saw him for a handful of snaps in the Packers game before the injury started. But it's like still, like once these guys play together more, they didn't really get that a lot in the preseason. And you can blame Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles for that as like, yeah, that's a mistake that they may have made and should have handled differently. But separately from that, it's also a sign that then this defense can, should, and will get better as they play together a bit more. It helps that after the Kansas City Chiefs, they're going to play some offenses that don't scare you as much. You know, Denver with Russell Wilson has had some ups and downs. They got some points in there, but it's not a well-oiled machine at all. Washington with the Commanders. Howell has looked decently, but still a young guy. I still think that train's going to come down a little bit when they start playing some better teams. And the Raiders don't scare me a ton offensively. The Carolina Panthers a little later on. Even the Saints offense has kind of been disjointed despite the success that they've had overall. They're going to have some better opportunities against defenses or against weaker offenses. Again, Chiefs, probably not so much. They're going to have some trouble with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, I'm sure. But beyond that, I think this defense should get better. Really curious to see where the defense goes from here. We'll certainly keep close tabs on the D all throughout the season right here on the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts, or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. That way, Christ, I can't talk. That way you're going to keep up with all of our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Come on back tomorrow for Crossover Thursday, where we'll talk to Chris Clark from Locked On Chiefs, and hopefully I'll be able to talk a little bit better than I am right now as I'm crashing and burning at the end of this podcast trying to get these words out. Good Lord. We'll talk to Chris Clark from Locked On Chiefs for Crossover Thursday tomorrow. Try and get a sense of maybe where we can find some weaknesses in Kansas City. And we'll put together a game plan for what it would take for the Bears to try and pull off maybe the upset of the season. That'll be Friday's podcast as well. So still some more gritties coming your way, even if the team is struggling. The podcast is not struggling, and we'll never struggle to find you a reason to bear down.